You can feel when a woman has finally stopped begging to be chosen. She no longer chases, explains, or settles, because she knows her value. And today, I'm going to reveal 7 things high-value women never do, because the moment you stop doing these things, people start treating you differently. A high-value woman never begs for attention or validation, because she has learned something that changes everything. Attention is not the same as love, and validation is not the same as worth. There is a difference between being appreciated and constantly needing someone to prove that you matter. When your confidence depends on another person's response, you give them control over your emotional state. One message can make you feel powerful. One unanswered text can make you question yourself. One compliment can lift you up, while one criticism can destroy your mood. That is not confidence. That is emotional dependence. A woman who knows her value does not spend her life asking, "Do they like me?" She begins asking, "Do I like who I become around them?" That shift is powerful. Instead of measuring herself by how much attention she receives, she measures herself by the quality of her character, the standards she maintains, the promises she keeps to herself, and the peace she protects. She understands that chasing attention creates desperation. The more desperately you try to make someone notice you, the more you communicate that their attention is something you need in order to feel complete. A high-value woman does not need to perform for affection. She does not constantly post just to get reactions. She does not create jealousy to make someone chase her. She does not send endless messages because she is afraid of being forgotten. She does not become someone else just because she thinks that version might receive more approval. She allows people to reveal their interest naturally. If someone wants to know her, they will make an effort. If someone values her presence, they will show consistency. If someone respects her, she will not have to repeatedly demand basic consideration. She understands that genuine connection should not require her to constantly audition for a place in someone's life. This does not mean she becomes cold or arrogant. It means she becomes emotionally secure. She can enjoy attention without depending on it. She can appreciate compliments without needing them every day. She can accept criticism without allowing it to define her identity. She can walk into a room without wondering whether everyone approves of her. And that kind of confidence is attractive because it comes from within. A high-value woman knows that validation can become an addiction. You receive a little attention, and suddenly you want more. You check your phone. You look for another message. You reread conversations. You analyze every word. You wonder why they viewed your story but did not respond. You start changing your behavior to get another emotional reward. Slowly, your peace becomes connected to someone else's actions. She refuses to live that way. She chooses to build a life that feels meaningful even when nobody is watching. She invests in her goals. She develops her mind. She takes care of herself. She builds relationships that are based on mutual respect. She becomes proud of the person she is becoming, not because everyone applauds her, but because she knows the work she has done when nobody was there to see it. The strongest form of confidence is quiet. It does not need constant announcements. It does not need to prove superiority. It simply exists in the way she carries herself, the boundaries she maintains, the choices she makes, and the people she allows close to her. When you stop begging for validation, you stop negotiating against yourself. You stop accepting less just because you are afraid of being alone. You stop tolerating inconsistency because you are hoping it will eventually become commitment. You stop confusing temporary attention with genuine affection. And you begin understanding that the right people will not require you to abandon your dignity just to keep their interest. You become comfortable letting people leave when they no longer align with your values. You stop forcing conversations that have already become one-sided. You stop chasing explanations from people who have already shown you enough through their actions. You stop trying to convince someone of your worth because you realize that your worth was never dependent on their ability to recognize it. That is where emotional freedom begins. A high-value woman never chases someone who does not choose her because she understands that genuine connection cannot be forced. You can convince someone to give you attention, but you cannot convince them to genuinely value you. You can send another message, explain your feelings again, give more chances, lower your expectations, and wait patiently for them to change, but none of those things can manufacture real desire, commitment, or respect. At some point, you have to stop asking someone to give you what they have already shown they are unwilling to give. Chasing someone often begins with something innocent. You like them. You see potential. You remember the good moments. You think about what the relationship could become if they just became more consistent. So you start making excuses. Maybe they are busy. Maybe they are afraid. Maybe they have been hurt before. Maybe they need more time. You become attached not only to who they are, but to who you hope they will become. And that is where you can lose yourself a woman who knows her worth, does not build her emotional life around potential. She pays attention to patterns. She watches actions. She notices consistency. She understands that words can create hope, but behavior creates trust. If someone repeatedly disappears, gives mixed signals, only reaches out when it is convenient, or makes her feel like she has to compete for basic attention, she does not turn that behavior into a personal challenge. She steps back not because she does not care, but because she cares about herself too. There is strength in allowing someone to make their own choice. If they want to be present, let them show it. If they want to communicate, let them communicate. If they want to build something meaningful, let their actions demonstrate that intention. You should not have to drag someone toward a relationship while pretending that their hesitation is romance. A high value woman understands that chasing creates an unhealthy dynamic. One person becomes the pursuer, while the other becomes the person who decides how much attention to give. The pursuer keeps increasing effort, hoping that eventually the other person will respond. More texts, more explanations, more patience, more emotional labor, more forgiveness. And every time the response remains inconsistent, she feels compelled to try even harder, but love should not feel like a campaign you have to win. When someone truly wants a place in your life, you should not have to constantly remind them that you exist. You should not have to manufacture jealousy to get their attention. You should not have to disappear strategically just to make them notice your absence. You should not have to become emotionally exhausted trying to decode whether they care. A woman with self-respect does not confuse pursuit with proof of love. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop moving towards someone and simply observe what happens when you stop carrying the entire connection. If they step forward, you have information. If they disappear, you also have information. Either way, you gain clarity. This does not mean a high-value woman never initiates. Confidence is not about playing games or pretending you do not care. She can express interest. She can communicate honestly. She can make the first move. She can tell someone how she feels. But she does not repeatedly pursue someone who consistently gives her reasons to question where she stands. There is a difference between showing interest and chasing approval. There is a difference between making an effort and begging for reciprocity. There is a difference between fighting for a healthy relationship and fighting to convince someone that you deserve one. She chooses reciprocity. She wants someone who meets her halfway because she understands that relationships become exhausting when one person is constantly pulling, the other person is constantly being persuaded, and when she realizes that someone is not accusing her, she does not immediately ask, "What is wrong with me?" She asks a better question. Why am I trying to earn a place where I am not being freely welcomed? That question changes everything, because rejection does not automatically mean you are not enough. Sometimes it simply means two people are not aligned. Sometimes someone is not ready. Sometimes they want something different. Sometimes their feelings are not strong enough. And while those realities may hurt, they do not reduce your value. A high-value woman allows people to make their choices without turning those choices into judgments about her identity. She does not chase closure from someone who refuses to communicate. She does not keep reopening the same door because she is afraid there might be something behind it. She respects herself enough to recognize when effort has become self-abandonment. She knows that the right connection does not require constant convincing. It requires two people who willingly show up, communicate, contribute, and choose each other through consistent actions. And when she stops chasing the person who refuses to choose her, she creates space for something far more important than their attention: her own peace, dignity, standards, and ability to walk toward people who actually want to walk toward her. A high-value woman never lowers her standards just to keep someone, because she understands that losing herself is far more painful than losing a relationship. She knows that love should add value to her life, not require her to abandon the values that make her who she is. There is a dangerous moment in relationships when you begin accepting things you once promised yourself you would never tolerate simply because you are afraid that setting a boundary might make someone leave. That is where self-respect begins to disappear. At first, it may seem harmless. You overlook the disrespect. You excuse the inconsistency. You accept broken promises. You stay silent when something bothers you. You tell yourself that nobody is perfect and that relationships require compromise. And yes, healthy relationships require compromise, but compromise should never mean sacrificing your dignity, your principles, or your emotional well-being just to prevent someone from walking away. A woman who knows her worth understands the difference between flexibility and self-abandonment. She can compromise on preferences, but she does not compromise on character. She can adjust her schedule, but she does not constantly make herself available to someone who gives nothing in return. She can forgive mistakes, but she does not repeatedly excuse patterns of disrespect. She can understand someone's struggles, but she does not allow their struggles to become permission for them to mistreat her. Her standards are not about demanding perfection. They are about knowing what kind of treatment she is willing to accept. She does not say, "I will tolerate anything because I love you." She says, "I can love you deeply and still refuse to accept what damages my peace." That distinction is powerful. Many people lower their standards because they confuse being chosen with being valued. They think that if they become easier to please, more forgiving, more available, or less demanding, someone will stay. But if someone only stays when you become smaller, quieter, and easier to disrespect, what exactly are you preserving? A high-value woman refuses to make herself smaller to fit into someone else's comfort zone. She does not silence her needs because she is afraid of being called difficult. She does not apologize for wanting consistency. She does not feel guilty for expecting honesty. She does not consider basic respect to be an unreasonable demand. She understands that standards communicate what she believes she deserves. And the way you treat yourself teaches other people how to treat you. If you constantly accept the bare minimum, people may assume the bare minimum is enough. If you repeatedly forgive behavior without requiring change, someone may believe there are no consequences for hurting you. If you continue giving unlimited access to someone who repeatedly disrespects your boundaries, your words begin to lose power because your actions are communicating something different. A high-value woman makes her boundaries visible through her decisions. She does not threaten to leave every time she is disappointed. She does not create drama to prove a point. She simply becomes willing to remove herself from situations that repeatedly violate her values. Her strength comes from knowing that she can survive someone's absence. This is important because sometimes the hardest part of maintaining your standards is accepting that someone may leave because of them. You may care deeply about someone and still realize that keeping them requires you to tolerate things that slowly destroy your confidence. That is not a victory. That is a trade you cannot afford. The right person does not require you to betray yourself in order to keep them. A healthy relationship gives you room to be honest, to have boundaries, to express concerns, and to remain an individual. You should not have to sacrifice your friendships, your ambitions, your identity, or your principles simply because someone says they love you. Love without respect becomes control. Love without trust becomes anxiety. Love without boundaries becomes emotional exhaustion. A high-value woman also knows that standards must apply to herself. She does not demand emotional maturity from others while refusing to practice it herself. She does not expect honesty while playing manipulation games. She does not ask for consistency while giving mixed signals. She holds herself accountable because knowing your worth is not about believing you are better than everyone else. It is about becoming someone you respect when you are alone. She understands that being single is not a failure, and being in a relationship is not automatically an achievement. The goal is not simply to be chosen. The goal is to build a life where the person beside you genuinely compliments the woman you have become. So when someone asks her to lower her standards, she pays attention to what they really mean. If they are asking her to compromise on something insignificant, she can be flexible. But if they are asking her to accept disrespect, dishonesty, manipulation, inconsistency, or emotional neglect, she recognizes that this is not compromise, this is self-betrayal, and she refuses to betray herself for temporary affection. Because the moment you realize you can walk away from what diminishes you, you stop negotiating with your own worth and start choosing from a place of clarity, self-respect, and inner certainty. A high-value woman never explains herself to people who are committed to misunderstanding her, because she understands that not everyone deserves access to her energy, her emotions, or her explanations. There is a difference between communicating clearly and constantly defending your character. When someone genuinely wants to understand you, A sincere conversation can create clarity. But when someone has already decided to judge you, twist your words, or misunderstand your intentions, no amount of explaining will ever feel like enough. Many women exhaust themselves trying to prove that they are good people. They explain why they made a certain decision. They justify why they said no. They defend their boundaries. They explain why they walked away. They try to convince someone that they were not being rude, selfish, distant, or difficult. And slowly, without realizing it, they begin living as if their every decision requires permission from someone else. A woman who knows her worth refuses to live that way. She communicates when communication is necessary, but she does not turn every misunderstanding into a courtroom where she has to defend herself. She knows that people interpret your behavior through their own experiences, insecurities, expectations, and assumptions. Sometimes their perception of you has very little to do with who you actually are, and someone can call you weak, you can be confident, and someone can call you arrogant. You can establish boundaries, you can become quiet, and someone you call you cold. You can walk away from disrespect, and someone can call you dramable. Does not automatically become the truth. A high-value woman learns are to separate feedback. Does not want more projection. She listens when someone gives her constructive criticism because she is secure enough to admit when she is wrong. But she does not accept every accusation as a fact simply because someone says it with confidence. She examines the situation, takes responsibility for what belongs to her, and releases what does not. That is emotional maturity. She does not need to win every argument. She does not need everyone to understand her choices. She does not need to convince every person that her intentions were pure. Sometimes, peace comes from accepting that someone may never see you accurately, and that can be difficult, especially when you care about the person. You may want them to understand your heart. You may want them to know that you never intended to hurt them. You may want them to recognize everything you did for them. You may want them to realize that their interpretation of you is unfair, but sometimes the more you explain, the more power you give the other person to keep questioning you. A high-value woman knows when the conversation has stopped being productive. She can say what she needs to say once, clearly and respectfully. After that, she watches what the other person chooses to believe. If they continue twisting her words, she does not spend hours creating a stronger defense. She allows their opinion to exist without making it her responsibility. This does not mean she avoids accountability. In fact, a woman with genuine self-worth can apologize when she is wrong. She can say, "I handled that badly." She can admit when her words caused unnecessary pain. She can listen without becoming defensive. But accountability is different from self-destruction. She does not apologize simply because someone is disappointed by a healthy barrage. She does not apologize for needing space herself. She does not apologize for choosing her own values. She becoming not apologize for when people who will only comment on control, like with her, when they need to somebody receives her. Think about how much energy is West trying to make for my ways. You replay conversations in your head. You rewrite messages. You wonder whether you should explain one more time. You ask friends what they think. You search for the perfect words that will finally make someone understand, but there is no perfect explanation for someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. A high-value woman understands that clarity is her responsibility. But someone else's interpretation is not. She can speak honestly without forcing acceptance. She can express her feelings without demanding agreement. She can set boundaries and ending approval. She can leave without demanding approval. She can leave without creating campaign and understand why she left. And the more comfortable she becomes with being misunderstood, the more authentic she becomes. She stops performing goodness for an audience. She stops making decisions based on how they will look to other people. She starts asking herself a more important question. Is this aligned with who I am and what I believe? That question creates freedom because when you know who you are, you do not need every person to confirm it. You can listen without absorbing every opinion. You can accept criticism without losing your identity. You can walk away from accusations without spending your entire night proving your innocence. You understand that your character is demonstrated through patterns, not through one conversation. The people who truly know you will judge you by your consistency, your actions, and the way you treat others over time. And those who have already decided to misunderstand You may continue doing so regardless of how perfectly you explain yourself. So she chooses her words carefully, speaks with honesty, takes responsibility where necessary, and then releases the need to be understood by everyone. Because her peace is no longer dependent on winning someone else's approval. A high-value woman never abandons her goals for a relationship because she understands that love should become part of her life, not the replacement for it. She can love deeply, support someone completely, and build a meaningful partnership while still protecting the dreams, ambitions, and identity she had before the relationship began. She knows that losing herself just to keep someone close is not proof of love. It is a sacrifice that can eventually create resentment, emptiness, and regret. When a woman enters a relationship, it can be tempting to make the other person her entire world. Suddenly, their plans become her plans. Their schedule becomes her schedule. Their priorities become her priorities. She begins saying no to opportunities because she wants to be available. She stops pursuing certain goals because she thinks the relationship requires it. She distances herself from friends. She puts her ambitions on hold. She tells herself that she will return to those dreams later, but later can become years. A high-value woman understands that a healthy relationship should not require her to disappear. She continues learning. She continues growing. She continues developing her talents. She continues building financial, emotional, and personal independence. She understands that having a partner does not mean surrendering her individuality. In fact, the strongest relationships often involve two people who have full lives of their own and choose to share those lives together. She does not expect someone else to give her purpose. She creates purpose within herself. This matters because when your entire identity becomes attached to a relationship, the fear of losing that relationship becomes enormous. You may tolerate things you would normally reject because you cannot imagine who you would be without that person. You may remain silent because you are afraid conflict could threaten the relationship. You may accept less because you have invested so much of yourself into making the relationship work. A woman who protects her own goals maintains something important. Perspective. She remembers who she was before the relationship and who she wants to become after it. She does not stop being ambitious simply because someone loves her. She does not stop taking care of herself because someone has promised to stay. She does not abandon the parts of her life that make her feel alive. And this is not selfish, it is healthy. There is a difference between supporting your partner and sacrificing your identity. A high-value woman can celebrate her partner's success without becoming threatened by it. She can encourage their dreams while continuing to pursue her own. She understands that love is not a competition where one person has to become smaller so the other can become bigger. She wants partnership, not possession. She wants someone who says, "Go after it," rather than someone who says, "Choose between me and your dream." Because the right relationship should create room for growth. Sometimes your goals will require difficult conversations. Maybe your career demands more time. Maybe you want to start a business. Maybe you want to continue your education. Maybe you want to travel, create, build, or accomplish something that matters deeply to you. A high-value woman does not automatically abandon those dreams because they make the relationship less convenient. She communicates, she plans, she compromises where compromise is reasonable, but she does not erase herself. She also understands that personal goals give her confidence that does not depend on romance. When you are building something meaningful, your emotional world becomes larger than your relationship. You have something to work toward when life feels uncertain. You have accomplishments that belong to you. You have skills, friendships, interests, and experiences that continue to shape your identity. This makes you stronger. Not less committed. A woman who knows her worth also refuses to make promises that require her future self to suffer. She does not say, "I will give up everything for you," simply because it sounds romantic. She knows that healthy love is not measured by how much of yourself you can sacrifice. It is measured by how much two people can support each other's growth without demanding self-abandonment. She understands that relationships change. Circumstances change. People change. Careers change. Priorities change. And if she has completely abandoned her own identity, she may eventually wake up feeling like a stranger to herself. That is why she keeps investing in herself. She reads, she learns, she builds. She creates, she maintains meaningful friendships. She develops emotional intelligence. She takes responsibility for her future. She knows that no relationship is guaranteed. But her relationship with herself is one she must live with every day. This does not mean she is preparing to leave. It means she is preparing to remain whole. She can love someone without losing herself inside them. She can build a home without abandoning her individuality. She can make sacrifices when they are meaningful and mutual, but she refuses to make one-sided sacrifices that slowly destroy her identity, because a woman who knows her worth understands that the goal is not to choose between love and herself. The goal is to build a love where she does not have to choose herself against the relationship, where both people can grow, pursue meaningful goals, maintain their individuality, and still come together with loyalty, respect, and genuine partnership. A high-value woman never allows disrespect to become a pattern, because she understands that what you tolerate repeatedly can eventually become what people believe they are allowed to do to you. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has moments of frustration, poor communication, and emotional weakness. But there is a difference between a mistake that someone genuinely takes responsibility for and a pattern of behavior that continues, because there are no meaningful boundaries around it. A woman who knows her worth does not expect perfection from people. She understands that relationships require patience, forgiveness, and communication. But forgiveness does not mean giving someone unlimited permission to hurt her. Understanding someone's circumstances does not mean accepting repeated disrespect. Loving someone does not mean allowing them to repeatedly violate the standards that protect her dignity. She pays attention to patterns. One bad day does not automatically define someone's character. One argument does not mean a relationship is unhealthy. One mistake does not mean someone does not care. But when disrespect keeps appearing in different forms, she stops making excuses for it. Maybe they constantly dismiss her feelings. Maybe they embarrass her in front of others. Maybe they speak to her with can-break promises. Maybe they ignore boundaries after she clearly communicates them. Maybe they manipulate her feeling guilty for having normal needs. Maybe they only show respect when they are afraid. She knows the difference between an apology and afraid to change words. But patterns reveal the truth. A high-value woman does not measure respect by how beautifully someone apologizes after hurting her. She measures it by what happens afterward. Does the behavior change? Do they take responsibility? Do they make an effort to understand the impact of their actions? Do they become more consistent? Or do they repeat the same behavior until another apology becomes necessary? That distinction matters, because without boundaries, apologies can become part of the cycle. Someone hurts you, they apologize, you forgive them, things improve temporarily, then the same behavior returns, and the cycle continues. A woman who knows her worth refuses to confuse repeated apologies with transformation. She can forgive someone while still deciding that she cannot continue participating in the same dynamic. She understands that boundaries are not punishments. They are clarity. A boundary says, this is what I will accept, and this is what I will do if that standard is repeatedly violated. It is not about controlling another person's behavior. You cannot force someone to respect you. You can only decide what you will do when they do not. That is where personal power comes from. A high-value woman does not spend her time threatening people with consequences she will never follow through on. She does not repeatedly say, if you do this again, I'm leaving, and then remain in the same situation indefinitely. She understands that credibility begins with herself. When she sets a boundary, she takes it seriously. If someone repeatedly crosses it, she creates distance. If someone consistently disrespects her, she limits their access to her life. If someone continues treating her poorly, she becomes willing to walk away, not because she wants revenge, not because she wants to make them suffer, but because she understands that peace is too expensive to keep paying for someone else's repeated disrespect. She also knows that respect begins with how she treats herself. If she constantly ignores her own needs, breaks promises to herself, and stays in situations that make her feel small, she begins teaching herself that her standards are negotiable. So she practices self-respect in small decisions. She says no when she means no. She speaks honestly. When something bothers, she does not laugh. It's her to peace. They simply keep the example. I think they through their pace of pain compassion might back in time. They may push a little further each time. If there is no response, the behavior can gradually become normal. What once felt unacceptable starts feeling ordinary simply because you have experienced it so many times. A woman who knows her worth interrupts that process early. She does not wait until resentment destroys the relationship before speaking honestly. She addresses issues when they appear. She communicates directly. She gives the other person an opportunity to understand and change. But if the pattern continues, she does not keep sacrificing herself in the hope that one day they will become different. She watches actions. She trusts consistency. She protects her emotional environment, and she remembers that walking away from disrespect is not failure, sometimes in the clearest expression of self-respect. Because the moment you stop accepting repeated disrespect, you send a powerful message to yourself: my peace matters, my dignity matters, my boundaries matter, and I will not abandon myself just because I am afraid of losing someone else. A high-value woman never forgets her worth just to be loved, because she understands that love should never require her to abandon the person she is. There is a difference between loving someone deeply and losing yourself completely inside that love. When you forget your worth, you begin accepting things that once would have been unacceptable. You start believing that keeping someone is more important than keeping your peace, your standards, your identity, and your self-respect. It often happens slowly. You make one small compromise because you care, then another because you want the relationship to work. You stay quiet about something that hurts you because you do not want conflict. You forgive something you are not ready to forgive because you are afraid they might leave. You begin changing the way you dress, speak, think, or behave because you want to become the person they will love more eventually. You may look at yourself and realize that you have been working so hard to keep someone else that you have stopped asking whether you are happy with the person you have become. A high-value woman refuses to let that happen. She understands that her worth existed before anyone entered her life. It does not begin when someone chooses her, and it does not disappear when someone rejects her. A relationship can recognize her value, but it cannot create it. That distinction changes the way she loves. She does not enter a relationship thinking, I hope this person makes me feel worthy. She enters thinking, I already know who I am, and I want someone who appreciates the person I have worked to become. This mindset protects her from emotional dependency. When you believe someone else determines your worth, you become terrified of disappointing them. You may tolerate disrespect because you think losing them means losing your value. You may chase affection because their attention temporarily makes you feel important. You may constantly compare yourself to other women because you are trying to understand what you need to become to remain desirable. A woman who knows her worth does not live in that constant competition. She knows she does not need to be the most beautiful woman in every room. She does not need to be the most successful person. She does not need everyone to find her attractive. She does not need to prove that she is better than someone else. Her confidence comes from knowing herself. She knows her strengths. She knows what she will tolerate. She knows what she values, what she will never tolerate. And she understands that being loved by the wrong person can sometimes cost more than being alone. Because society often teaches women to measure success whether the wrong person, because few then we've been chosen. A relationship becomes something to display. Being wanted becomes a source of status. Being single can feel like something that needs to be explained, but a high-value woman does not measure her life by relationship status. She measures it by the quality of her life. She asks whether she is growing, whether she is peaceful, proud of her choices, whether she is surrounded by people who respect her, whether she is becoming the woman she wants to become, and whether she is in love. She does not abandon those questions. She keeps her identity, she keeps her friendships, she keeps her goals, she keeps her standards. She keeps her ability to say no. She understands that healthy love does not demand complete surrender of individuality. There will always be moments when relationships require sacrifice. Sometimes you compromise your plans for someone you love. Sometimes you give more because they are going through a difficult season. Sometimes you put their needs ahead of yours temporarily. That can be part of genuine love. But there is a difference between sacrifice and self. Erasure sacrifice is something you choose freely. Erasure happens when you believe you must disappear to remain loved a high value woman watches for that difference. She does not become silent just to avoid upsetting someone. She does not pretend to be okay when she is not. She does not hide her ambitions because someone feels threatened by them. She does not accept emotional manipulation because she is afraid of being called selfish. She understands that the right person will not need to become less of herself in order to feel secure for two people opinions, two people with imperfections, two people who can tell you each other. Aruba knows her worth, also understands that love cannot be used as an excuse for someone saying, I love you, does not automatically make their behavior loving. Real love is reflected through respect, consistency, honesty, consideration, and accountability. She pays attention to what love looks like in practice, because words can be beautiful while actions tell the deeper story. If being loved requires constant anxiety, constant proving, constant chasing, or constant self-sacrifice, she steps back and evaluates the relationship honestly. She asks herself whether she is being loved or simply trying to earn love. That question can reveal everything. And when she realizes that she has been abandoning herself to keep someone else, she begins returning to herself one decision at a time. She starts saying what she really thinks. She starts protecting her time. She starts honoring her boundaries. She postponed. She starts reconnecting with the rights of herself. She does not have to earn the right to respect herself. She does not have little hindrance in that what someone letting her herself she can give. We va become amazing of she can you weep high. You want the world's where the why. Yeah. She wonderful to talk about because knowing your worth means understanding that being loved is beautiful, but remaining loyal to yourself is non-negotiable.